we're back in business with season 2 of House of the Dragon. And I have been looking forward to this for quite some time now, as I've been counting down to the season premiere, reviewing the previous season, and I'm excited. As is what occurred in the first season of House of the Dragon, we're not opening with guns blazing or dragons blazing, we should say. Instead, carrying over from the season finale, there's still this tension, but war hasn't quite broken out. The two sides are still getting their resources in place, trying to figure out who their allies are versus who's against them. And so when the episode opens, it's at the wall. And we see, some Starks of that time and whatnot, and they're discussing this wall. And it's we haven't seen Game of Thrones. We know what's to come. What is it, 200-300 or so years later? And so I thought it was actually pretty cool that the season opened up at the wall. And this conversation of keeping death out. That the wall is such, it was built a long time ago, but the wall is such that even the dragons, who at this point in time, everyone within the Seven Kingdoms fears, that even they wouldn't think of crossing this wall, right? That they'd previously been visited by, I think, was it Viserys or Jacaerys? But one of the previous rulers had visited the wall, and the dragons refused to cross it, right? Which tells you what's beyond it, right? That even they're afraid of what's beyond. So here we have it, though, that there's this fight within the kingdoms, but this threat that we know will become a greater reality in time. But for the time being, the threat is within the Seven Kingdoms. I believe it's a raven or a message or whatever arrives from King's Landing, where there's discussion about, what side are the Starks going to take? What side are they going to join? Who are they going to back? And the reality is that the Starks had promised Viserys that they would back his daughter as being heir to the throne. They'd sworn their loyalty and their allegiance to this succession plan. And as such, they take their word very seriously. They see it as a point of honor, and as a result, will not turn aside from this promise that they made. So we can count House Stark in the Targaryen column. I thought it was a nice way to return to the season by going back to this familiar landscape for those of us who watch Game of Thrones. So with that, there is some conversation about loyalty, right? Because that's what it boils down to, that the various houses were asked to pledge their allegiance to this succession plan, and at issue now is, who's going to go back on their word and why? Because at the time, everyone swore allegiance to it. But it'll kind of start to show, as a point of honor, but then also with scheming and backstabbing and whatnot, who's going to cross over to the other side. At the same time that conversation is taking place, where you have this broader conversation about the houses and who will and will not back Rhaenyra's claim to the throne, you also have a more personal or closer, let's say, situation forming as well, which would be Daemon. Daemon is at Dragonstone with Rhaenys. They are trying to hold down the fort because, remember, they haven't fully accumulated their resources as yet, right? The Valyrians are with Rhenyra. We now know the Starks are with Rhenyra. But, they haven't gotten their armies and all of this stuff together. If you think of it, Aegon, he has a standing army, being in King's Landing. He has the Gold Cloaks. He has, theoretically, the City Watch. He is kind of starting from this position that he has as king. He's starting out with the resources of the kingdom at his disposal. They kind of have like a bit of a head start in gathering their resources. Now, for Rhaenyra's side of things, Daemon is somewhat of an unknown quantity at this point, right? How much can you really trust him? If you recall from the season finale, he seemed a bit shaky. Not a bit. He seemed questionable as far as where his loyalties will lie. Because we saw him kind of attempting in his own way to usurp Rhaenyra's power and authority, where Aegon is sitting on what can be argued as Rhaenyra's throne, right? Like, they've usurped her position by moving Aegon into place, right? When she had been named as Viserys' heir. But then here you have it where Daemon just takes it as a foregone conclusion that he would be the leader, that he would make the decisions, that he would give the orders. And you saw when that tensions arose between Rhaenyra and Daemon when she pushed back against that, right? The threat of violence that we saw, where he didn't plainly state what his intentions were, but we can assume that they're quite clear in that he basically choked Rhaenyra. And here we have it where she is absent. He's at Dragonstone. Rhaenys is helping to patrol Dragonstone to keep a lookout for any dragons or approaching ships and whatnot. And she comes back in for some rest and to rejuvenate her and her dragon so that they can eat and get some rest and whatnot after their patrol. And Daemon immediately wants to go to King's Landing to kind of push and press the fight there, where we find out that Rhaenyra has gone off on her own in search of confirmation that her son has died. And Rhaenys is actually I actually really like Rhaenys. She seems, from what we've seen of her in various situations and circumstances, that she is one of the more unbiased characters, a voice of reason, and really helps to bring sense to a lot of nonsensical situations. And she speaks reason to Daemon where, he's attempting to give her orders that, we're going to go to King's Landing and we're going to do this and that. It's like, well, sir, there's just a little matter of you not being the king. So, we're not doing what you say. Rhaenyra, who we're supposedly fighting for, who we're supposedly supporting, is off dealing with the current situation. Let's have some patience and give her time. And when she comes back, she can give orders. But until then, it's a no-go from you. But again, you have this thing of Daemon where he's taken it upon himself, where it's like, it's a matter of doing too much. Where he's not just supporting Rhaenyra or providing reinforcements for her ideas, her decisions, or even, when she proposes ideas, questioning them and stress testing them to ensure that they're the best laid of plans. Instead, what you have is him seemingly trying to take over. Where it's like, it seems like he is having and will continue to have a hard time being in a supportive role to her, where at each and every opportunity he gets, he's going to try to push to be the leader. And the reality is, you were heir at one point in time, but Rhaenyra then became heir. We can argue from there if Aegon is a legitimate heir to the throne or not. But what has been firmly decided is that you, Daemon, are no longer in the line of succession. Like, you are off the table, pushed aside. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And it's for much the same reason that we see here, where at every turn, since the conflict is kind of heated up, Daemon's response is just to rush in and fight, and it's just action and movement. Where the people around him, Rhaenyra and Rhaenys, their response is, let's be smart about what we're doing, let's be cautious, let's not rush into things. Daemon might end up becoming like the problem within. Like he's that one problematic player on Team Black, where everything is, we're working in support of our queen. No one's trying to be a hero here, except for Daemon. And that's why you're not here anymore, sir. Now, a sad point in the episode, I would say, is watching Rhaenyra, who is on this quest and journey to find her son. Completely understandable. And I think Rhaenys does a great job of explaining it, where Rhaenyra might have heard that her son died, but given the way that it occurred, over the ocean, that it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, she would want some kind of confirmation of this. Like, she needs to see it for herself, to see his body or some kind of proof of it, which would be devastating, but would help to make it real that indeed her son has died. And I actually thought the scene was pretty cool with the way that they set it up, where we see her off in the distance looking at, some fishermen and whatnot. We can assume, and we see her like very early on in the episode, where she's flying around from place to place. There's no conversation. She doesn't interact with anyone, but we see her again about halfway through the episode, where she's standing off at a distance and she's like looking around and whatnot. There's a group of fishermen who pull in, it looks like a haul of fish, and one of them yells out that there's a dragon wing caught in the net. At which point the camera shifts and we see the men start running, right? They yell dragon and take off. And we just know that it's Rhaenyra. You see the dragon comes in for a landing, and she very quickly hops off of his back to go and see for herself. And unfortunately, it's confirmed. She sees the dragon wing, but there within the net is Lucerys' cloak. And I like this interplay between the dragons and the people. I really did not like the dragons originally. Didn't really care for them in Game of Thrones. Wasn't really feeling them in the first season until towards the end. Like that fight between Lucerys and Daemon, I was like, okay, I can maybe get with the dragons. But here, and now seeing the relationship between Rider and Dragon is starting to grow on me. And to see it here where the dragon is kind of an extension of Rhaenyra, where, the dragon comes and basically shoos away everyone. And, Rhaenyra's heartbreak, sure, she cries and whatnot, seeing her son's cloak, but the dragon helps to emphasize it. And I think if they can make them not look incredibly cheesy and fake, and you have more of these kinds of moments where it feels like they're a part of the story rather than something thrown in there to just spark conversation and, for cool CGI graphics, I think it could be a pretty cool addition. I'm coming around to the dragons. I'm coming around to them.
Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, go ahead and click the thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.